النشيد الرسمي للاتحاد الافريقي. السيدات والسادة أصحاب المقام الرفيع، رؤساء وأعضاء الوفود المشاركة في الدورة العاشرة للمنتدى القاري السنوي لهيئات إدارة الانتخابات في الدول الافريقية. السيدات والسادة المحترمون، ممثلي الاتحاد الافريقي والمنظمات الإقليمية والدولية المشاركة في أعمال المنتدى، ترحب الهيئة الوطنية للانتخابات بحضراتكم جميعاً على أرض الكنانة مصر وفي مدينة السلام شرم الشيخ، التي تحتضن اليوم الأشقاء من القارة الإفريقية. نجتمع اليوم في هذا الملتقى لنفتتح معاً أعمال الدورة العاشرة للمنتدى القاري السنوي لهيئات إدارة الانتخابات في الدول الإفريقية، ولنؤكد مجدداً وحدة مصيرنا وعمق روابطنا وحرصنا المشترك على بناء مستقبل ديمقراطي مشرق لشعوبنا. إن انعقاد هذا المنتدى يمثل ركيزة أساسية من ركائز العمل الإفريقي المشترك، كما أنه أصبح منصة هامة تساهم في تعزيز المسار الديمقراطي. والآن نبدأ الجلسة الافتتاحية لأعمال المنتدى، وأدعو السيد ستيفانو دي ليو المدير المركزي لشؤون دول إفريقيا بوزارة الشؤون الخارجية والتعاون الدولي في إيطاليا لإلقاء كلمته عبر تطبيق زوم، فليتفضل.
Hello. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear friends. Good morning to all of you. Sabah al-Khair. Okay. And it's a genuine pleasure for me to address you this morning on behalf of the Direction of Sub-Saharan Africa of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, who supports these very important activities. Let me begin by thanking the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the African Union Commission and the Association of African Electoral Authorities for convening this important forum. My thanks go equally to the National Electoral Authority of Egypt, our host, and to the European Center for Electoral Support, whose steady support has helped make this gathering possible. And this gathering follows closely the event we were honored to host in Rome on the 5th of May. I hope you can hear me because I lost contact. It's okay? Okay, so we follow up a meeting that was held in Rome on the 5th of May, and we welcome this opportunity to reflect on the same subjects that brings us together today. I would also like to greet the many election management bodies represented here today from across all the African continent, together with the regional economic communities, the EMB networks, and the international partners who have joined this forum. It is indeed a valuable opportunity have gathered in one place such a breadth of institutional experience on the electoral matters. The theme chosen for this forum, diaspora, voting, progress, gaps, and prospects, could not be more timely. Africa's diaspora is, as it has rightly noticed, the continent's sixth region, a community of tens of millions of women and men who remain bound to their countries of origin, not only through the remittances they send home, but through their ideas, their skills, and their enduring civic engagement. Recent estimates suggest that between 40 to 55 million people of African descent live outside their countries of origin. And this is not a marginal phenomenon at the fringe of national life. It is a structural feature of contemporary African societies, and one of that our democratic institution must learn to accompany rather than to overlook. It's a very important contribution to societies to learn from each other, to grow together for the mutual benefit. The contribution of this diaspora to national development is by now well documented, but the diaspora's contribution goes well beyond remittances. It is also a matter of skill transfer, entrepreneurship, innovation, philanthropy, and advocacy. Ensuring that this community has a genuine voice in the democratic life of its countries of origin is not therefore a technical afterthought. It is a matter of principle grounded in the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, and is increasingly a marker of the strength of inclusiveness of democratic institutions. Italy follows this agenda with particular attention, and I would say with particular empathy. As a country which is one of the largest and most diverse diasporas in the world, we have ourselves traveled a long road in building the legal and operational architecture needed to enable citizens abroad to vote, from the introduction of postal voting to our constituencies abroad, to the more recent debates on how to keep the system secure, accessible, and trusted. We know from direct experience that this is a road made of both real progress and persistent challenges, and that no country, however long established its democratic institution, can consider this question fully settled. It is precisely for this region that we value so highly the work of the AAEA and of Africa's election management bodies in advancing peer learning and the exchange of good practices on this very subject. The figures speak for themselves. Some 28 African countries already allow their citizens to vote from abroad. And this is one form or another. And the normative foundation for this is well established, not least through Article 18 of the African Charter of Democracy, Elections and Governance. It is precisely in that space between the principle and the practice that the forum such as this one can make the greatest difference. Over the 2 days ahead, you will examine this question from many angles: the normative and conceptual frameworks that underpin diaspora voting, the state of implementation across the continent, the operational and logistical challenges that fall in the end on the shoulders of election management bodies, questions of cost, feasibility, and sustainability, and the political, security, and trust factors that shape how these arrangements are perceived by citizens at home and abroad alike. This is an ambitious agenda, but it is the right one, and I'm confident it will produce not only a valuable exchange of experience, but concrete, actionable recommendation for the path ahead. I'm confident that over the next 2 days, you will bring to this forum the same spirit of cooperation and the same forward-looking approach that has characterized this partnership so far. I have no doubt that your discussions will yield concrete and valuable orientations, and I welcome the great General Assembly of the AAEA that will follow on the 8th of July as a further step in consolidating this community of practice. By ending my brief remarks of welcome, I wish you all a most productive and successful forum, and I look forward to following the outcomes of your work with greatest interest. Thank you very much and good work.
Thank you so much. أدعو السيدة جين منسا رئيسة الجمعية العامة ورئيسة اللجنة الانتخابية في غانا لإلقاء كلمتها عبر تطبيق زوم، فلتتفضل.
Good morning to all of you from Accra, Ghana. I had hoped to be in Sharm el-Sheikh by now, but circumstances have not allowed me to be, and I'm hoping to join you, tomorrow. But a good morning to all of you from Accra. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 10th Annual Continental Forum of Election Management Bodies in Africa. At the onset, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to the African Union Commission and the European Center for Electoral Systems for their continued partnership and support in making this important forum possible. I also wish to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the National Election Authority of Egypt, and in particular to its chairperson, Councillor Hazim Badawi, for the warm hospitality extended to all in this beautiful city of Sharm el-Sheikh. This forum has, over the past decade, become an important platform for Africa's election management bodies to exchange ideas, confront emerging challenges, and to collectively strengthen electoral democracy across our continent. The fact that we continue to gather in this spirit of cooperation is itself a testament to our shared commitment to improving the quality and credibility of elections in Africa. Over the past 3 decades, ladies and gentlemen, Africa has made remarkable progress in consolidating democratic governance. Over the past 3 decades, Africa has made remarkable progress in consolidating democratic governance. Across our continent, regular elections have become the constitutional norm rather than the exception. Election management bodies have grown stronger and legal frameworks have matured. Additionally, electoral technology has evolved and citizens have come to expect credible, transparent, and free and fair elections. This year's theme, diaspora voting, gaps and opportunities, and the way forward, could not be more timely. Across Africa, increasing numbers of our citizens are living, studying, and working beyond our borders. They continue to contribute meaningfully to the economic and social development of their home countries through remittances, investments, knowledge transfer, and international advocacy. Yet, many remain unable to participate in one of the most fundamental rights of citizenship, that is the right to vote. According to the United Nations, more than 20 million African-born citizens currently reside outside the African continent, whilst millions more live elsewhere on the continent outside their countries of origin. Together, they constitute an important part of our national communities whose voices deserve careful consideration within our democratic process. Their economic contribution is equally significant. Remittance flows to Africa now exceed 100 billion annually, providing an essential source of income for millions of households. In several African countries, remittances represent one of the largest sources of foreign exchange and exceed both official development assistance and foreign direct investments. Given these realities, it is understandable that many African citizens living abroad increasingly seek greater participation in the governance of their countries. As election management bodies, we recognize the legitimacy of that aspiration. However, while the democratic case for diaspora voting is compelling, the practical implementation of out-of-country voting is considerably more complex than is often appreciated. It is therefore important that our discussions over the coming days reflect not only the opportunities before us, but also the operational, legal, and political realities that accompany such reforms. The experience of countries around the world demonstrates that there's no single model for diaspora voting. Countries such as Senegal have successfully established voting at diplomatic missions abroad, enabling citizens to cast their votes at embassies and consulates. South Africa has adopted a similar approach for its citizens abroad. These models offer useful lessons. However, at the same time, they reflect the unique constitutional arrangements, technological capabilities, financial resources, and political contexts of the country concerned. What works successfully in one jurisdiction cannot simply be transplanted into another without careful consideration. For Africa, the question is therefore not whether a particular model has succeeded elsewhere. Rather, it is how each country can design a system that is credible, transparent, financially sustainable, and trusted by all stakeholders. As chairperson of the Electoral Commission of Ghana, I can attest that these questions are not merely theoretical. In Ghana, Parliament enacted the Representation of the People's Amendment Act, commonly referred to as ROPA, in 2006, affirming the right of Ghanaian citizens living abroad. While the legislation established the legal framework, full implementation has proven considerably more complex than anticipated. Currently, Ghana allows for proxy voting for registered voters who will be absent from their constituencies on election day, including those abroad. Although the numbers of those who participate in this proxy voting process remain relatively modest, they have grown steadily over successive electoral cycles. In 2012, 494 people cast their ballots through proxy arrangements. This increased to 534 in 2016 and 1,900 in 2020. In 2024, 2,364 persons cast their ballots through the proxy arrangement in the general election. Ladies and gentlemen, while these figures represent only a small proportion of our electorate, they demonstrate a growing demand among citizens who wish to maintain their participation in the democratic process despite being away from home. The broader implementation of the ROPA, however, presents challenges and extends well beyond the mandate of any electoral management body, and particularly in the case of Ghana, and I believe this is so for all electoral management bodies. The first challenge that I see is that of financial. In an environment where technology has not been fully employed and where political party leaders want to see and witness and be present at every aspect for the electoral process, our systems largely remain manual and physical. Therefore, conducting elections abroad require significant additional resources. Registration centers must be established, election materials must be procured and transported, staff must be recruited and trained, polling stations must be equipped, and secure systems must be put in place for ballot management and results transmission. For countries with extensive diplomatic networks and large diasporan populations spread across multiple continents, these costs are substantial and must compete with numerous other national priorities. The second challenge I see is one of logistics, and this should not be understated. Before an election even begins, fundamental operational questions must be answered. Where exactly are our citizens located? How many are eligible to vote? Which embassies or consulates can realistically serve as polling stations? In countries with vast geographical distances, should citizens be expected to travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers simply to exercise their franchise? If not, what alternative arrangements are feasible, secure, and affordable? These decisions have significant implications for voter registration, staffing, ballot security, transportation of election materials, counting procedures, and the timely transmission of results. They also determine whether access to voting is genuinely equitable or merely theoretical. Perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest challenge, however, is one of political confidence. Across Africa, election management bodies have invested decades in building electoral systems that allow political parties, candidates, observers, and citizens to scrutinize every stage of the electoral process. Transparency is achieved because stakeholders are able to witness the registration, observe polling, monitor counting, and verification collation. Out-of-country voting inevitably complicates these arrangements and could undermine trust. If political parties and stakeholders do not have confidence in the arrangements of out-of-country voting, the credibility of the process itself may be questioned, regardless of how professionally election management bodies administer it. This is why diaspora voting cannot be achieved and viewed solely as an election management issue. It is an important democratic reform that requires broad consensus among governments, legislatures, political parties, citizens, and civil society organizations, among others. Election management bodies do not determine who is eligible to vote. They do not allocate national ballots to these processes. Our responsibility is to implement the legal framework and to administer elections with integrity, impartiality, and professionalism. For this reason, ladies and gentlemen, the successful introduction of diaspora voting depends upon all stakeholders moving together. Whether there's political consensus, adequate financing, and shared confidence in that where there's, I'll take that again. Where there's political success, where there's political consensus, adequate financing, and shared confidence in the process, election management bodies can deliver. Where these fundamentals are absent, implementation becomes significantly more difficult and may unintentionally create new areas of dispute rather than strengthen democratic participation. Ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect on the way forward, I believe our approach should be deliberate, practical, and incremental. Rather than attempting to implement global out-of-country voting simultaneously, countries may wish to carefully design pilot programs, focusing on those locations where the greatest and largest concentrations of their citizens reside. Such an approach would allow us to gain valuable operational experience, test procedures, identify challenges, and strengthen public confidence before expanding further. As the chairperson of the Electoral Commission of Ghana and president of the Association of African Election Authorities, I also believe that there's considerable value in developing continental guidance on out-of-country voting. While each member state should continue to adopt approaches suited to its constitutional framework, the exchange of standards, operational experiences, and best practices can strengthen implementation across the continent. Colleagues, extending the franchise to citizens living abroad is an important democratic aspiration. It reflects the evolving nature of citizenship in an increasingly interconnected world and recognizes the valuable contribution of our diaspora communities to the development of our countries. At the same time, we must acknowledge that this is one of the most complex electoral reforms in any election management body can undertake. It requires not only sound administration, but also political consensus, adequate resources, a robust legal framework, and above all, public trust. I'm confident that over the next 2 days, our discussions will produce practical recommendations that reflect both our democratic aspirations and our operational realities. I thank you all for your attention and wish us all a fruitful engagement over the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you so much. والآن أدعو السيد فابيو بجاكي المدير التنفيذي ومؤسس المركز الأوروبي لدعم الانتخابات لإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل.
Excellency, Honorable Chairperson and Commissioner, distinguished colleagues and dear friends, good morning. Allow me, first of all, to associate myself with the protocol already so ably observed by the previous speakers and our Master of Ceremony. It's a great honor and a true privilege for me today to address this opening of the 10th Annual Continental Forum of Electoral Management Bodies, which this year will be followed as well by the 13th General Assembly of the Association of African Electoral Authorities. The Association of African Electoral Authorities has become the largest continental network of electoral management bodies in Africa, whose work ECAS is proud to support together with the African Union Commission and the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. We are deeply grateful for the trust placed in us and for the opportunity to contribute through our comparative experiences and strengthening cooperation among electoral management bodies across the continent. 10 editions of this forum and 13 General Assembly of the AEIA represent much more than milestones. They represent a decade of African leadership, a decade of continental dialogue, and above all, a decade of peer learning among electoral management bodies. This forum has become one of the African Union Commission's flagship policy platform for strengthening cooperation among EMBs and contributes directly to the implementation of Article 18 of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. Through especially exchange of experience like this one, peer learning and the sharing of good practices. Last year in Accra, we were all reunited and we reflected on a simple but fundamental principle. Every vote counts. This year in Sharm el-Sheikh, we continue the journey by addressing another issue that lies at the very heart of the democratic inclusion, the political participation of African citizens living abroad. Diaspora voting, by the way, is much more than a technical and logistical challenge. Today, as we heard from Director De Leo, 28 African countries already provide some form of external voting of eligible citizens abroad. And it is estimated that 40 to 45 million Africans living outside their country of origin. Over the next 2 days, we will have the possibility to explore together the legal, operational, technological, and financial dimension of this challenge, learning from African experiences, but as well from other regions like Europe, the case of Moldova, and Latin America, the case of Brazil, since we have indeed the possibility to hear their own case studies as they've been invited. And this is important because it helps to identify solutions among electoral management bodies that can adapt to their own national reality. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me briefly to introduce the European Center for Electoral Support for those who might not yet be familiar with our organizations. ECES is an independent, neutral, and not-for-profit foundation that had the privilege to establish together with other democracy electoral practitioners, and especially with our former president, late Abbé Apollinaire Mulumolu, who was the former president of the Electoral Commission of Democratic Republic of Congo, and I would say one of the past African great champions on electoral integrity. Our mission has been always to facilitate electoral cooperation between the European Union member states, and its partner countries, especially in our case in Africa, especially through capacity development, leadership development, peer learning, political dialogue, and mediation in support of electoral integrity. Since then, we have mobilized more than 150 million euros from the European Union member states, recruited over 11,000 collaborators between national and international experts, and supported the capacity development of more than 800,000 electoral stakeholders. More recently, we have also specialized in artificial intelligence, digital resilience, and cybersecurity, including through the executive peer learning mission that many of you already attended here in Rome last May. Ladies and gentlemen, our partnership with the African Union Commission and Association of African Electoral Authority has deep roots. In May 2021, together with the Commissioner Bancolé, we signed a memorandum of understanding that, through the support of the government of Italy, made possible the implementation of the Pro-Electoral Integrity Project. From its very beginning, it was never conceived as a traditional technical assistance project. It was indeed conceived as a genuine continental partnership, a partnership jointly implemented with the African Union Commission, a partnership built on African ownership, on peer learning rather than prescription, on dialogue rather than lecture, on cooperation rather than dependency. The topic we are discussing today perfectly reflects this continuity. From the executive peer learning mission in Rome last May to this forum in Sharm el-Sheikh and the AAA General Assembly later this week, every one of these activities formed part of the same continental journey under the Pro-Electoral Integrity Project. As a proud Italian citizen, allow me to express once more my sincere gratitude to my country that has embraced a vision of partnership with Africa that today is fully consistent with the spirit of their Mattei Plan, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and long-term cooperation. Italy has not simply financed these kind of activities, it has invested in African leadership, it has invested in stronger African institutions. And above all, I would say it has invested in the conviction that sustainable electoral integrity can only be built by Africans themselves. Together, over these years, we have worked alongside the African Union Commission, 51 of Africa's 55 electoral management bodies countries, and we have organized 13 executive peer learning missions, supported 4 continental forums and General Assembly, and strengthened cooperation with all African regional electoral networks, including contributing to the establishment of the Central African Network of Electoral Management Bodies, completing the continental architecture of African sub-regional electoral management bodies networks. Together, we have also supported important African Union initiatives that go well beyond elections themselves, including the mainstreaming of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance into school curriculum, and the African Union works on transitional justice through continental forum that we have co-organized in Morocco, DRC, and Togo. But perhaps our greatest achievement cannot be measured at all in numbers. Today, electoral management bodies increasingly turn first to one another to exchange experiences, discuss common challenges, and identify African solutions. That, in my view, is the greatest achievement of the partnership we have built together with the African Union Commission, thanks to the government of Italy. Like every project we are implemented at the CAS, the Pro-Electoral Integrity Project is also implemented through our own specific approach, which is called European Response to Electoral Cycle Support, better known as EUREX, which is much more than a methodology for us. It's our strategic vision, it's our implementation philosophy, and it is the operational architecture through which ECAS implements all our projects. It is founded upon one simple conviction. Electoral integrity cannot be built only during electoral periods. It must be strengthened throughout the entire electoral cycle through institutional development, leadership, peer learning, democratic governance, conflict prevention, and continuous innovation. This year is particularly symbolic for ECAS as well. Exactly 10 years ago, in 2016, we formally published the first edition of our strategy. Today, after 16 years of implementation experience in more than 70 countries worldwide, we are proud to launch in this specific event the updated edition. And it's not a new beginning. It is the natural evolution of the vision that has guided us since 2010. It has been updated exactly to respond to a world shaped by profound geopolitical transformation nowadays, armed conflicts, democratic backslidings, foreign information manipulation and interference, thanks to artificial intelligence, which is rapidly evolving, and the imperative to safeguard electoral integrity through stronger cybersecurity and digital resilience. Although its title refers to a European response, this publication has been profoundly enriched by African experience. This should not surprise us, since the case itself was funded by an Italian and an African. Therefore, many of these innovations were refined with African electoral management bodies. In many respects, Africa has not simply implemented EUREX. Africa has helped redefine including it in our latest quest to concentrate on the issues of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity of electoral management bodies. Dear friends, technology will continue to transform elections. Artificial intelligence will increasingly become part of electoral administration, and cybersecurity will become even more essential. But one principle will never change. Public trust remains the greatest asset of every electoral management bodies. Trust is built through professionalism, through integrity, through transparency, through dialogue, and this is precisely why this forum matters. We celebrate the 10th edition of this forum and the 13th General Assembly of the Association of African Electoral Authority. Let us continue strengthening not only electoral institutions, but also the remarkable continental community that has grown around them. When an electoral management body innovates, the whole continent benefits. When one institution overcomes a challenge, every other institution learns. And when Africa works together, electoral integrity becomes stronger everywhere. Allow me finally to conclude with one personal reflection. 30 years ago, in 96, I arrived in Africa, as I'm used to say, for the very first time in Dakar, Senegal. I could never have imagined that this extraordinary continent would become such an important part of my professional life and in many years of my personal journey. Since then, I had the privilege and the honor in working and living in 51 African countries. Coincidentally, or perhaps symbolically, that is also the number of electoral management bodies engaged today in the Pro-Electoral Integrity Project since 2021. But these are not simple numbers. They represent friendships, they represent trust, they represent a shared commitment to democracy. As a proud Italian citizen, I'm deeply honored that my country has chosen to accompany this remarkable continental journey. As founder and executive director of ECES, I'm profoundly grateful that our organization has been entrusted to contribute to it. But above all, I stand before you today as someone who has learned far more from Africa than I could ever hope to give back. I remain convinced that the next chapter of electoral integrity will increase in Africa, by Africa and for Africa, and with Africa leading the way. I wish all of us a productive and inspiring, successful forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. والآن أدعو السيدة بيشنس زانيلي، مديرة شؤون الحوكمة ومنع النزاعات، إدارة شؤون السلام والأمن العام، مفوضية الاتحاد الأفريقي، لإلقاء كلمتها، فلتتفضل.
Your Excellency, the head of the African Union permanent delegation to the League of Arab States, Excellency Ambassador of Italy to the Arab Republic of Egypt, the chairperson of the National Elections Authority of the Republic of Egypt, the president of the African Association of Electoral Authorities, Madam Jean Mensa, the executive director and founder of the European Center for Electoral Support. Allow me also to recognize the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission here present, honorable chairpersons and members of election management bodies, representatives of our regional economic communities and regional mechanisms, as well as electoral networks, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished experts, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. It is indeed such a great honor to be here in this beautiful and welcoming city of Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
Et toi, tu vas bien? Tu as passé une bonne journée hier?
It's okay? Yeah. I can proceed? And on behalf of the Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, His Excellency Ambassador Bankola Adjoye, I would like to welcome you all to this 10th Continental Forum of Election Management Bodies, the first to be organized in the northern region of Africa and graciously hosted by the National Elections Authority of the Arab Republic of Egypt. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the government and the people of the Arab Republic of Egypt, as well as the National Election Authority, for graciously agreeing to host this august forum convened under the timely and important theme, Diaspora Voting, Progress, Gaps, and Prospects. This attests to the commitment of Egypt and the National Elections Authority in standing together with the rest of the African continent to advancing democratic governance and, broadly speaking, and electoral integrity, to be specific. It is also to acknowledge the strong partnership between the African Union Commission and the European Center for Electoral Support, which has made this forum possible. Excellencies, before I touch on the theme of this year's forum, I want to reiterate the fact that the EMB Forum is one of the flagship platforms of the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security, and it has been held since 2012, which is 14 years ago. The forum has provided the needed space for election management bodies to engage in experience sharing, build networks, reflect, and dialogue on key electoral issues affecting our continent. To this end, the previous fora have contributed to strengthening electoral institutions and promoting credible and inclusive electoral processes in line with the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and the principles enshrined in the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. This forum is also particularly important as it is held soon after the conclusion of the third Accra Reflection Forum on unconstitutional changes of government, where it was emphasized that elections remain the key and acceptable way of electing our leaders on the continent. Now let me turn my attention to the theme of this year, which is Diaspora Voting, Progress, Gaps, and Prospects. All over the world, millions of citizens of the 55 African Union member states live outside their countries of origin, while and yet maintaining strong social, economic, financial, cultural, and political ties with their homelands. The African Union recognizes the African diaspora as the sixth region of our continent and acknowledges its strategic contribution to Africa's development and transformation. Indeed, beyond the substantial remittances sent annually to African economies, members of the diaspora continue to contribute through entrepreneurship, skills transfer, innovation, philanthropy, and advocacy. Their contributions underscore the importance of ensuring that citizens residing abroad are not excluded from participating in the governance of their countries. The right of citizens to participate in public affairs is grounded in continental and international norms. Article 13 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights provides that every citizen shall have the right to participate freely in the government of his or her country, either directly or through freely chosen representatives. Similarly, the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance underscores the importance of inclusive participation and democratic citizenship. I believe that most regional instruments on democracy and governance equally lay emphasis on the need for all citizens to participate in the electoral processes and governance of their countries. We must therefore remain committed in our conviction that democracy must be citizen-centered and that no African should be left behind as we deliberate on this important subject. The legitimacy of democratic governance is derived from the involvement of citizens wherever they may reside. In a world that is becoming more interconnected, civic inclusion should not be hindered by geographical distance. Rather, our institutions must continue to evolve in a manner that enables all Africans, including those living in the diaspora, to be able to exercise their rights and contribute to the governance and prosperity of their respective countries. Excellencies, in view of the normative framework, the African Union has taken a positive note of the fact that a growing number of member states have adopted constitutional and legal provisions enabling citizens abroad to participate in elections. These developments are commendable and demonstrate the continent's commitment to increasing democratic inclusion. However, experience has also shown that legal recognition alone is not sufficient. While most member states have recognized the concept of diaspora voting, its implementation remains uneven. Questions about legal frameworks, financial sustainability, operational modalities, security considerations, infrastructure, voter registration, and the growing threat presented by misinformation and disinformation continue to present significant challenges. The issue before us, therefore, is no longer whether diaspora voting should exist in principle, but rather how it can be implemented in ways that are credible, inclusive, sustainable, and consistent with the integrity of electoral processes and our legal frameworks. As migration patterns evolve and transnational communities expand, EMBs are required to adapt to changing realities. This calls for innovative approaches, stronger institutional cooperation, and the sharing of lessons and experiences among member states. It is encouraging that many African member states have accumulated valuable experiences and good practices in organizing out-of-country voting. Equally, comparative experiences from other regions provide useful insights that can enrich our own approaches. This forum provides us an opportunity to collaboratively review where we are, identify existing gaps, and discuss practical solutions customized to African realities. In doing so, we remain committed to the fundamental principles of universal suffrage, equality of participation, transparency, integrity, and public trust. We must also recognize that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. The diversity of political systems, legal traditions, and institutional capacities across our member states requires context-specific and practical solutions. The African Union remains committed to supporting member states and EMBs in strengthening democratic governance and promoting inclusive participation. Through our electoral assistance mandate and our partnership with EMBs, regional economic communities, civil society organizations, and development partners, we shall continue to facilitate dialogue, capacity building, and the exchange of good practices. I am confident that the deliberations over the next 2 days will generate practical recommendations that will contribute to strengthening diaspora voting frameworks and enhancing the participation of Africans abroad in the democratic life of their countries. On this forum, I would like to renew our commitment that all African citizens, regardless of where they reside, could contribute to the development of our continent, our beautiful Africa. In this endeavor, we must persist in our pursuit of African solutions to African challenges. Lessons from experiences around the world are useful but sustainable and credible modalities for out-of-country voting must be rooted in Africa's diverse realities, institutional capacities, and democratic aspirations. Through dialogue, peer learning, and institutional collaboration amongst our EMBs and all stakeholders, we can identify practical and context-sensitive approaches that will enhance electoral integrity and deepen democratic inclusion across our continent. I wish us all, therefore, fruitful deliberations and every success in our discussions, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much. والآن أدعو سعادة السفير علي درويش رئيس الوفد الدائم للاتحاد الافريقي في القاهرة لإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل.
Monsieur le Président de l'Autorité nationale des élections de la République arabe d'Égypte, Madame Jean Mensa, présidente de l'Assemblée générale, présidente de la Commission électorale du Ghana, Mesdames et Messieurs les présidents et représentants des organes nationaux de gestion des élections, Excellence Madame Agustine Palis, ambassadeur d'Italie en Égypte, Madame Patience Zanili Shirazza, directrice de la Commission de la gouvernance et de la prévention des conflits au niveau du département des affaires politiques et de sécurité et de paix de l'Union africaine, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est pour moi un grand honneur et un réel privilège de prendre la parole aujourd'hui à l'occasion de l'ouverture de la 10e édition du Forum annuel des organes nationaux de gestion des élections. Je voudrais tout d'abord adresser mes sincères félicitations aux organisateurs, notamment l'Union africaine et l'Autorité nationale des élections d'Égypte, en collaboration avec le gouvernement italien et le Centre européen d'appui aux élections. Donc je voudrais leur adresser mes félicitations pour cette importante réunion, ainsi que mes remerciements aux autorités de la République arabe d'Égypte pour leur hospitalité légendaire et leur engagement constant en faveur du renforcement de la gouvernance démocratique sur notre continent. Cette 10e édition revêt une importance particulière. Elle constitue non seulement une étape symbolique dans le parcours de ce forum, mais également une occasion privilégiée d'évaluer les progrès accomplis, de partager les expériences nationales et d'identifier des solutions innovantes face aux défis qui accompagnent l'évolution des processus électoraux en Afrique. Le thème de cette année, en l'occurrence le vote de la diaspora africaine à l'étranger, progrès, lacunes et perspectives, est particulièrement pertinent et d'une actualité certaine. La diaspora africaine représente aujourd'hui une force considérable pour le développement économique, social, culturel et politique de notre continent. Selon, comme l'ont précisé plusieurs de mes prédécesseurs, selon plusieurs estimations actuelles, les transferts financiers des diasporas africaines dépassent largement les montants de l'aide publique au développement reçus par plusieurs des États africains. Mais au-delà de leur contribution économique, les Africains vivant à l'étranger demeurent des citoyens à part entière, profondément attachés à leur pays d'origine et désireux de participer à son avenir démocratique. L'Union africaine reconnaît pleinement cette réalité incontournable. C'est dans cet esprit que la diaspora a été reconnue comme la 6e région de l'Afrique, appelée à contribuer activement à la réalisation de l'agenda 2063, qui est notre feuille de route commune pour une Afrique intégrée, prospère et pacifique. Garantir la participation politique de nos compatriotes vivant hors du territoire national constitue donc une composante essentielle de la consolidation de la démocratie, de l'inclusion politique et de la citoyenneté. Au cours de ces dernières années, plusieurs États membres de l'Union africaine ont accompli des avancées remarquables en permettant à leurs ressortissants établis à l'étranger de participer aux élections présidentielles, législatives, voire au référendum. Des réformes législatives, des mécanismes d'inscription consulaire, ainsi que l'utilisation croissante des technologies numériques modernes ont permis d'élargir progressivement l'accès au vote. Bien plus, plusieurs pays accordent désormais le droit d'éligibilité aux membres de la diaspora que ce soit en leur permettant de se présenter en tant que candidat aux élections présidentielles, ou bien en réservant un quota spécifique de députés de la diaspora devant siéger au Parlement national. Ces expériences démontrent qu'il est possible de concilier les exigences de sécurité, de transparence et d'intégrité électorale avec le droit fondamental des citoyens à participer à la vie politique, indépendamment de leur lieu de résidence. Cependant, force est de reconnaître que des défis importants et des lacunes subsistent. Parmi celles-ci ou ceux-ci, je citerai les contraintes juridiques et constitutionnelles, les coûts élevés de l'organisation du vote à l'étranger, les difficultés logistiques liées à la dispersion géographique des électeurs, la coordination avec les États d'accueil, la sécurisation des opérations électorales, ainsi que la nécessité de préserver l'intégrité, la transparence et la crédibilité du scrutin. À cela s'ajoutent les nouveaux défis liés à la cybersécurité, à la désinformation et à la protection des données personnelles qui imposent une vigilance accrue dans un contexte de transformation numérique accélérée. Ce sont autant de difficultés et de contraintes qui forment des défis majeurs qui feront l'objet, j'en suis convaincu, de discussions approfondies durant les 2 jours que notre forum durera. Le partage des bonnes pratiques entre les organes nationaux de gestion des élections, le renforcement des capacités institutionnelles, l'harmonisation progressive des cadres juridiques, ainsi que le développement de solutions technologiques adaptées aux réalités africaines constituent autant de pistes prometteuses à explorer. L'Union africaine demeure pleinement engagée à accompagner les États membres dans cette dynamique, notamment à travers la mise en œuvre de la Charte africaine de la démocratie, des élections et de la gouvernance, des déclarations de l'Union africaine sur les élections démocratiques, ainsi que des initiatives conduites par le département des affaires politiques, de la paix et de la sécurité de la Commission de l'Union africaine. Mesdames et messieurs, la démocratie africaine continue de progresser, doucement mais sûrement. Elle évolue, s'adapte et se renforce grâce à l'engagement de nos institutions, de nos citoyens et de nos partenaires. Le vote de la diaspora ne constitue pas uniquement une question technique ou administrative. Il s'agit avant tout d'un enjeu de citoyenneté, d'inclusion, d'égalité des droits et de renforcement du lien entre les États africains et leurs ressortissants établis à travers le monde. En donnant à chaque citoyen africain la possibilité de participer aux choix qui engagent l'avenir de sa nation, nous consolidons la légitimité de nos institutions démocratiques et renforçant le sentiment d'appartenance à une Afrique unie et prospère. Je forme le vœu que les travaux de ce forum permettent d'aboutir à des recommandations concrètes, pragmatiques et innovantes qui inspireront les réformes futures dans nos États membres. Je souhaite à toutes et à tous des échanges fructueux et beaucoup de succès dans nos travaux. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you. والآن أدعو السيد القاضي حازم بدوي نائب رئيس محكمة النقد رئيس الهيئة الوطنية للانتخابات لإلقاء كلمته، فليتفضل.
أستأذنكم في استخدام سماعات الترجمة لأني سأتحدث باللغة العربية. السيد ستيفانو ديليو المدير التنفيذي لشؤون دول افريقيا بوزارة الشؤون الخارجية والتعاون الدولي بدولة ايطاليا، السيدة جين منسا رئيسة الجمعية العامة ورئيسة اللجنة الانتخابية بدولة غانا، السيد فابيو برجاكي المدير التنفيذي ومؤسس المركز الأوروبي لدعم الانتخابات، السيدة بيشن زانيلي مديرة شؤون الحوكمة ومنع النزاعات بإدارة شؤون السلام والأمن العام بمفوضية الاتحاد الإفريقي، سعادة السفير علي درويش رئيس الوفد الدائم للاتحاد الإفريقي في القاهرة، سعادة السفير أرتسوس مونيتشا نائب رئيس الاتحاد الأفريقي السابق، سعادة السفير كاليكستن باري رئيس قسم الديمقراطية والانتخابات بمفوضية الاتحاد الأفريقي، سعادة اللواء دكتور إسماعيل محمد كمال محافظ جنوب سيناء، السيدات والسادة رؤساء وممثلو الإدارات الانتخابية في الدول الإفريقية الشقيقة، يسعدني أن أرحب بكم جميعا في مدينة شرم الشيخ جوهرة البحر الأحمر، أرض المحبة والسلام. إن انعقاد هذا المنتدى في نسخته العاشرة يمثل محطة بارزة في مسيرتنا المشتركة، إذ يجمعنا اليوم إيمان راسخ بأهمية تطوير الممارسات الديمقراطية في قارتنا الإفريقية وترسيخ مبادئ الشفافية والنزاهة في العمليات الانتخابية التي تشكل حجر الزاوية في بناء الأوطان والمؤسسات. يعقد المنتدى تحت شعار محوري يمس حياة الملايين من المواطنين الأفارقة، ألا وهو التصويت في الخارج، والذي يرتبط في ظني ارتباطا وثيقا بتكنولوجيا الانتخابات. فنحن هنا في لحظة فارقة تتطلب منا جميعا إعادة النظر في مفاهيم المشاركة الديمقراطية لتشمل كل مواطن إفريقي أينما ساقته ظروف الحياة. فلا يخفى علينا جميعا أن مبدأ المشاركة السياسية هو ركن أساسي في ميثاقنا الإفريقي للديمقراطية والانتخابات والحوكمة. ومن هذا المنطلق يبرز ملف التصويت في الخارج كأحد أهم التحديات التي تواجهنا، فهو ليس مجرد إجراء تقني بقدر ما هو تجسيد لحق دستوري وواجب وطني تجاه أبناء وبنات قارتنا الإفريقية الذين هاجروا بحثاً عن فرص أفضل، لكنهم لن ينقطعوا يوماً عن وطنهم الأم. إن أبناء الجاليات الإفريقية في الخارج يمثلون قوة اقتصادية هائلة من خلال التحويلات المالية التي تصل إلى بلدانهم، ويشكلون جسوراً ثقافية وسياسية. بل يمكن القول بأن كل مغترب في الخارج يعتبر سفيراً لبلاده، ولا يمكن بأي حال من الأحوال أن نحرمهم من ممارسة حقهم في التعبير عن إرادتهم عبر صناديق الاقتراع. ففي الوقت الذي نطالبهم فيه بدعم أوطانهم في الأزمات وأن يظلوا على ارتباط دائم بوطنهم الأم، لا يسمح لهم بالتصويت في تقرير مستقبلها، فإن ذلك يعتبر تناقض ديمقراطي يجب أن نعمل على معالجته. وقد استطاعت مصر أن تمنح أبنائها في الخارج حق التصويت في الاستحقاقات الانتخابية الرئاسية والبرلمانية، وتمكنت من تجاوز كل التحديات اللوجستية والتقنية بإرادة سياسية وتخطيط محكم واستثمار كافة الإمكانات الفنية والتكنولوجية. يمكننا جميعاً أن نتشارك في ترسيخ وتعميم مبدأ تصويت المغتربين من خلال عدة خطوات أراها تحقق هذا الهدف النبيل. أولاً، تبادل الخبرات والتجارب الناجحة حول آليات تسجيل الناخبين في الخارج وتنظيم عمليات الاقتراع وضمان نزاهتها وشفافيتها، مع الاستفادة من التطورات التكنولوجية المتسارعة لتسجيل العقبات. ثانياً، وضع تصورات واقتراحات عملية لتسجيل العقبات التشريعية والإدارية التي تحول دون تفعيل هذا الحق، والعمل على تضمين التوصيات في القوانين الوطنية. ثالثاً، الالتزام بمبدأ المساواة، حيث لا يجوز أن تكون المشاركة في العملية الانتخابية مشروطة بالجغرافيا، فالمواطنة حق لا يسقط بالهجرة. الحضور الكريم، إن نجاحنا في إدماج جالياتنا في الخارج في العملية الانتخابية سيعزز من مصداقية انتخاباتنا ويوسع قاعدة المشاركة الشعبية ويرسخ مبادئ العدالة والديمقراطية التي ننشدها جميعاً، لنكن على قدر المسؤولية التي أوكلتها لنا دولنا، ولنعمل معاً لضمان أن يكون صوت كل إفريقي مسموعاً أينما كان صاحبه على وجه الأرض. وأخيراً، فنحن في مصر نعتز بثقتكم في اختيارها منصة لانعقاد هذا المنتدى. نلتزم بدعم مسيرة العمل الإفريقي المشترك في مجال تعزيز الديمقراطية وحرية الاختيار والحكومة، وعلى استعداد تام بتقديم كافة المساعدات والدعم للأشقاء الأفارقة من خلال تجربتنا السرية في هذا المجال، سواء بتنظيم دورات تدريبية أو تقديم المشورة في صورة أوراق عمل ودراسات لشرح هذه التجربة. أتمنى أن تشعروا بأنكم في بلدكم الثاني، لأنكم في الحقيقة بين أهلكم. تجمعنا القارة التي نحبها جميعاً، وتجمعنا آمال مشتركة ورؤى متقاربة. أهلاً وسهلاً بكم، وأمنياتي لأعمال المنتدى بالتوفيق والسداد. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بشكر حضرتك، والآن أدعو حضراتكم جميعاً إلى استراحة قصيرة مدتها 30 دقيقة لنبدأ في أعقابها مباشرة أعمال المنتدى، وشكراً.